Welcome to Stepwise. You might notice this voice sounds a little different today, and that's because today's interview is of Foster Mobley. So you are hearing the voice of Jana Devan. I'll be facilitating the interview today, but what I really want to talk about is this remarkable person that we're going to get to hear for the next 30 minutes, Dr. Foster Mobley. You have heard him ask questions to many different leaders about authenticity and growing in leadership, how to really show up as your full self at work. And he's someone who walks it like he talks it. He's a father, a business owner, a student, and an outdoorsman. And today we're going to talk about some of the lessons Foster has learned along his journey of interviewing now over 50 people, but really focusing on these first 10 and thinking about the lessons that have come up along the way, from Janet Foutty to Valorie Kondos Field to Kent Thiry. Foster has taken so much from these interviews, as we hope you have too. And so today we thought it would just be special to open up the floor to Foster and let you get to know him a little bit. So without further ado,
my name's Foster Mobley. I am the founder and chairman emeritus of a human capital consulting and advisory firm called FMG Leading, founded in 1984. Been at it a while, have a wonderful and inspiring cohort of colleagues across the country, where about 80% of our work is in healthcare. My focus in my 45 years in practice has been on kind of the duality of leadership / culture and business strategy. So my job is, as a CEO coach, CEO whisperer, to help advise them on not the strategic moves necessarily, but how they need to lead them, because behavior without the context of strategy, like why are we doing it, isn't useful. I live in Bozeman, Montana. My wife, Kathy, of 34 years, who's also a leadership coach. And I have 3 kids and a bunch of wonderful grandkids, and we're getting ready to celebrate the holidays with one of them.
I know across the season, we've talked to a lot of people across all different sectors, and many of them were talking about how leadership is evolving to be more human-centered. How does that reaffirm or challenge what you believe as you've coached for all these years?
They were good interviews, right? That was a lot of fun. Oh boy, it's funny. What a great country this is. They get paid to interview people and learn and get inspired all over again. It's fantastic. The notion that I approach them all with is, what is leadership like in this challenging time? And to the person, they were talking about my words, a different relationship between leader and follower. The standard 1980, 1990 textbook, leaders inspire, leaders create followers, all that kind of stuff is important. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. Sufficient today, according to them, is a sense of purpose and place, where people can have more of a voice, where people have a chance to fulfill their full capabilities. And that's hard to do. And yet that's the right thing to do. So it affirmed what I've known and believed and taught for many years about the importance, the primacy of the relationship between leader and follower. One of my mentors, the late Warren Bennis, said the relationship between leaders and followers is an intimate allyship. Leaders and followers are intimate allies. And I believe that to be true. And so what intimate allies means in today's world, with multi-generations, with more humanity being brought in, is being redefined as we go. We don't even know it all yet, but we know it's different than what it used to be.
Yeah, and you mentioned it's difficult to do. How does that translate into coaching someone how to do it? You are helping CEOs learn how to do this thing that we can't even really put our finger on yet. So how does that work?
The catchphrase of FMG Leading is, and has been for a while, we work at the intersection of humanity and high performance. One without the other would be kind of half the battle. After these interviews, and based on my own reading and research, I think about leading today at the intersections, like a Venn diagram, with three factors. One is, what does the leader need to do to lead him or herself? To show up fully, untriggered, unencumbered, present, being clear of biases that would shape a conversation or a relationship in one way. I talked a lot about that in my first book, about having a clear stream. But what does the leader need to do in today's tumultuous world to show up fully? So, leading self. I call it honoring. What do we need to do to honor ourselves fully so that we can be full participants in our life and leading? The second circle then is honoring the other. And that is the relationship between leader and follower or two partners. The power over paradigm is done and dead. There's enough research that says it doesn't work anymore in this complex world. So, what must I do as leader to honor the other person, to create a partnership, to listen more deeply, to really truly regard the other human being, whether or not I agree with all of what they say? This is not, it's really funny because there's a lot of misnomers about honoring the other. Like, oh, gee, this is the Gen Z that wants participation trophies. No, it's not. It's not. It is about how we can help each other live our full destinies. And then the third concentric circle is that of honoring the organization. Because you and I can have a great love fest. We we can have all these quote kumbaya moments and really have a great relationship. But if we don't honor the organization's needs for performance in a particular value centric way that the organization decides, we haven't fulfilled our full requirement. And that means that organizations in today's world are undergoing change, disruption in ways that, as a whole, we haven't seen. We really haven't seen. Just when we thought everything was cool, then AI comes along. Just before that, global pandemic came along that shut everything down, and we really learned about virtual work and the digital revolution. Just before that, and you can fill in your just before that. Meanwhile, we're dealing with four generations in the workplace, all of whom have very different perspectives and needs and stuff like that. So if we don't honor the needs of the organization to perform in a very tumultuous, disruptive time, we haven't really done it. So I think it is leading today, if you think about it, is three concentric circles. Showing up fully, leading self, honoring self. Showing up fully for you, honoring you, helping you get the best. Like, doesn't that make sense? That you perform at your highest and best? And then leading and honoring the needs of the organization. Any one of those three without the other two, it's an unfulfilled picture. And so for me, that's the kind of paradigm that's come out of all these interviews.
Yeah, and I think one of the through lines of what everyone has talked about is this idea of balancing personal well being with performance, which kind of aligns with these three concentric circles you're talking about. And, trying to find balance between these things is a huge barrier for leaders right now. Do you have any advice on trying to achieve that in organizations?
Well, I'll take exception to one simple word, and I don't know, and it's the word balance because I don't know what that means. There are times that I'm going to work 100 hours in a week and it's going to fill me up. I'm going to be so jacked because I'm moving the ball down the field, and that's what needed to be done in the moment. There are times where I'm not. I'm not that attentive. So it's really regarding or honoring or listening to, being able to handle this dynamic need between those three forces: self, other, and organization. But there is no question, Jana, to the heart of your question. There is a greater sense that the workplace needs to be a catalyst in some part, maybe not all, but in some part, to helping people fulfill their personal purpose and align their work with something of value that matters to them. You know, trust in global institutions is at an all time low. Trust in churches, trust in academia, trust in government, all time low. And it was interesting because 20 years ago, the trust in business organizations was low, but now, maybe it's because of the virtual nature of some of it or hybrid natures. Now, people are looking for that as a part of their community. And in that, they get some of their personal needs fulfilled. And so organizations would be wise to pay attention to that need for purpose and mission and helping people accomplish theirs to the extent they can. The fact, and the other thing that got pointed out a lot in the interviews, these are free agents. The agency of employees or teammates or whatever we call them today has never been higher. They can walk. They can and do walk. They can walk with their levels of engagement, but they could walk with their employment. They could become an influencer and make 3 times the amount of money than they make working on a job description and do it on the beach and have fun doing TikToks. How do we compete against that unless we're helping create environments for people to truly, truly, that matter to them, where they can really fulfill themselves deeply based on purpose and mission?
It reminds me of what Jen Fisher was talking about in your interview, her position and learning with Deloitte that people need to be happy at work. Like it's such a simple thing, but we need to find ways to really get people engaged and make their cup full, or else they're not going to want to stay.
Yeah, I loved her point. Do people need to be happy at work? Well, what is the impact that work has on their happiness? Gee, if we could pay attention to that, yeah, being happy helps engagement, helps all that kind of stuff. Now, simplistically ask, because I get to ask this a lot, is my job as a supervisor to make everybody happy? No, your job as a supervisor is not to make everybody happy, but it's to honor that person's needs and it's to honor the organization's needs. And let's find something in that balance. But it's not just to assign a task and say, peace out, and let me know in 30 days when you're done. Because people are looking for different levels of meaning and engagement with the people in their work.
Yeah, and it seems like a lot of that would rely on self reflection. And it was surprising through all of these interviews you did, these CEOs and coaches all talking about how they spend time, deep time in self reflection and really honor that part of themselves. And I'm curious if your own personal work has shaped your ability to lead and coach others.
Oh, without question. So I forgot who said it, but somebody said if you don't have mindfulness practice set up by now for yourself, you're probably playing at a percentage of your full capabilities, because that gives us a chance to sit and reflect on our actions and the impact of our actions. Because the fact is, as leaders, I'm not paid for people taking action, I'm paid for people getting results. I want to get the most effective way toward those results possible. Therefore, I take an action, I measure the impact. I see if it has a desired, if it doesn't, if I can reflect after the fact, also in the moment, but if I can reflect after the fact and adjust myself based on self knowledge and getting lots of feedback, the next time around, I'm much more likely to get better impact, probably with fewer resources expended. So, mindfulness practices are really important. There was a quote I read this morning that said, we are expected to look in a pot of boiling water and get clarity. But it's only when before the water boils, where it's still, that we can see a real reflection. And only after the water boils, when it's still, can we see the reflection. So we're trying to get clarity from those things, but we're looking at the pot when it's boiling and doing the best we can. And so those periods of stillness before and after, hopefully as a matter of life practice, matter a whole lot. So yes, for me, it's been huge. My daughter, Erin, who was, I think, episode number 9 or 8 or something, who gave a phenomenal argument why, if leaders aren't doing their own work now, they're lost. They don't have the same opportunity to stay ahead of or be part of this great tumult going on. But she started me on a process of reflection and journaling about 2 years ago. And it's been monumentally powerful, because I know, for one, I'm a hard-boiled recovering MBA. I think logically. At least I think it's logical. I think logically. And I don't always take the time to reflect. I process emotions slowly. I'm not one of the people that can figure out, well, now I'm feeling XYZ. It takes me a bit to get to that. So a daily process of journaling and reflection helps me process, even if it's the day before's kind of tangle, and I get clear and I went, oh, yeah, that's what it was about. And I reacted this way. Next time, hopefully, I can be present enough to react the following way, which is way better. So yeah, it's been monumentally foundational for me.
Yeah, it's hard to learn about yourself without reflecting on what you've done. If you're just, bulldozing through life without thinking about your actions, it would be incredibly hard to learn and lead and have, you know, regard for others and regard for yourself.
Thank you. In my coaching, I tell leaders, you don't need to do this stuff. You don't need to reflect. You only need to do it if you want to learn quickly.
Hmm.
If you want to learn quickly, then learn to reflect. The Army does it. They do these after action reviews so that they don't repeat the same thing again and they learn more rapidly. You only need to reflect if you're interested in learning, which, of
Hmm.
course, sarcastically, almost everybody is. Almost everybody.
Especially people like you who are the MBA, logical thinkers.
Oh boy, oh boy.
You're
Yeah, I
like,
put on my finest blazer for you today because I got my MBA suit on.
yes. Well, you had really dove into the idea of authenticity in this season and as you're thinking about your upcoming book. And so it was a recurring theme. And I'm just wondering, has your idea of authenticity shifted or what does it mean to you?
What I learned from our initial, I don't know, 10 or so plus interviews was that it is authenticity within limits. It is if you are moving your organization's goals and forward and you're speaking goals forward and you're speaking as a member of that organization, rather than yourself, then it is great and important to speak your truth if it helps move the organization's goals forward and serves the organization's mission. If it is not, if it is something that is about you and not the organization, as an organization leader, while it could be authentic to, say, look, I had a crappy cup of coffee at Starbucks this morning and that barista, and I'm going to get on the, because it's free speech and because I'm being authentic. That really stunk. I didn't like who is that serving? It's not serving anybody. And so again, authenticity within or serving a purpose, I think, is what I learned about for business leaders.
I loved that conversation you had with Valorie about the students and social media and going on and just saying, whatever is on the top of their head. And I think Valorie said, that's authentic in the moment, but not to the person. And so, there's a fine line there that we need to balance.
One of the guests I hope is in season 2 is a gentleman named Dan Doty. And Dan and I talked, this is early on, and we were just kind of discovering this together. But he coined the phrase kind of layers of authenticity. And I really like that because I can be honest, but not completely disclosive at a variety of different levels. And his thesis, he hadn't thought about it this way before, but his thesis is if we think authenticity is only at the deepest, darkest level, oh, gee, I was potty trained when I was 6 as a child. It took me a long time. And who needs to know that? Right? But layers of authenticity that says, I still struggle with close relationships with very strong people. And that's what I'm working on. Like, that's deep, but it's not, it's not, the other. So layers of authenticity is a really interesting idea that I hope we can share in the next season of Stepwise.
One layer of authenticity is, trying to balance your vulnerability in leadership. And I'm curious if there's a moment in your life where being vulnerable strengthened your leadership or deepened a relationship, and how that aligns with the, authenticity we're talking about.
Yeah, almost always. I'll just say that almost always. It's a phrase that Byron Katie uses. Almost always. The first time I remember, I was 28 years old. I was doing something. I was taking a class or something at the Forum Corporation in Boston, Massachusetts. Wonderful organization. I think it still exists, but in different forms now. I met some life changing friends and colleagues there. I was in a class learning something. I was 28, maybe 29 years old. I had always been on top of the world. And as an Enneagram 3, my image and, showing up strongly and properly was always a big deal. And I got news that my father was in the hospital. And so we get ready to start then that day. That it was day 2 of a 3-day thing. And we all did a kind of a check-in. How are you doing? And for the first time in my life, I let myself be candid with other people like that in a business setting. I said, I'm not well. I'm not doing well. And there's part of me that wants to go home and, like, I'm not sure what I could do there, but just I can't think about staying. My father is ill. I'm worried. And to the person, it was like, please go. Please go. Take care of you. Like, and so I didn't know that you could do that. I honestly did not know that you could be honest in a work setting, and not honest like, gee, I like the way you did that, or I don't like the way you did that. It was, I am hurting. There's something going on in my personal life right now that's keeping me from being my best, and it's compromising my participation here. And they helped me come to a decision that I probably wouldn't have come to otherwise had I not been just that candid and vulnerable and raw with people. So, and so that was 27. And I continue to get hit over the side of the head all the time. That reminds me that just candor, vulnerability is stuff is the way to go. I've got a decision I'm making right now that, oh my God, I hate conflict like that, but I know I need to do it. And but it's that reminder of, be yourself, be truthful, come from a compassionate place, but speak your truth is the way to go. So yes, it's only almost always.
You can't turn off being human. And I think a lot of us who went to business school and, learned to kind of deal in this very proper way think, oh, I shut the human off and now I just go work. And so experiencing that at 27, 28, it seems like a really great time to get that message early in the career so that you can then be vulnerable the rest of your career.
There's a phrase that I'm using these days. I deal with in the book, and it's the phrase that those younger than me use very commonly, which is, "And they're not wrong." So generations, several layers below or above, maybe above me, younger than me, don't have that same problem with vulnerability in the workplace. They don't have the same problem with, hey, my dog got sick and ate something bad. I'm not feeling it today. Like, there are levels and limits to that. On the other hand, it's for somebody like me, for whom responsibility in my generation and my work is everything. To put my personal needs up is a hard thing. Are they wrong? Are younger generations wrong to make more of their needs known and out loud? I don't think they're wrong. I just don't think they're wrong. Now, how we deal with it's a whole different issue. But I don't think they're wrong to say, you know what, I'm hurting today. I need some help. I need some support from my team. So, with this notion about today's workforces are bringing their fuller sense of their humanity into the workplace, and it's up to all of us to kind of figure that puzzle out. I think that's right. It's because they're not wrong.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's been a much healthier workplace in the past 5 years than early in my career, at least in what I've experienced. So I'm very
Yeah.
grateful for
Yeah.
people who, led that charge. You've worked with so many remarkable people in coaching. We got to hear from them this season, and I'm sure we'll hear from more. How does that influence you in how you lead?
I get paid to listen and to learn, to synthesize and to share ideas and models, some of which come from the people that I'm already working for. So, for example, with a hospital CEO like Paul Viviano, I've learned so much from him about high performance and about humanity, the respect, the dignity, the candor, the approachability that he offers, all while coaching a high performance organization. That I can learn from that, and I can take examples like that one into my coaching work with others, and it also into my leading. Leadership is such a dynamic thing, and it's such a social enterprise that it's not something we can pick up a book and read and go, okay, I got this leadership stuff, even though When I wrote my first one, I mentioned, I think in the introduction, that there were 277,000 books at the time on leadership. Like, we can't pick up a book and learn about the dynamic social interaction between people. That's something that happens over time, but and a lot of it comes from what we learn in working with other people. So, has Paul had a huge influence on my life and leadership? Absolutely. Has Joe Mello had a huge, like Kent Thiry, like those people, Valorie Kondos, have they had a huge impact on how I think about and lead other people? Without question. Just too numerous to mention.
Yeah, and I really hope people who listen to this interview will go back because, all of these interviews have taught me so much. It really has been a masterclass for me. And so I just think, hearing you and how you interact with people and the people that you've coached or are in your network, it's just so fascinating and really something that is special.
Yeah, the one common theme, Jana, that they have is that they're no bullshit people. These people are legit, cream of the crop. They've done their work. They've taken their lumps. They've healed their scars. They've done whatever, and they've created exceptional performance.
I wanted to ask about a little bit more about mental health. There's a question here that the interplay between leadership and mental health was brought up a lot. And I know we've already touched on this a little bit, but more on the like burnout side of things and having resilience through these times. Like you talked about October 7th and the pandemic and all of these things happening right now. There's discourse about healthcare, in our country. And so I'm just curious, how can leaders prioritize well-being without guilt during these times?
One of our hopefully season 2 guests, Julie Kennedy Ehlert, points to research in our interview about the levels of dissatisfaction and burnout among CEOs and C suite people. So this is not just an organizational phenomenon, it's a leadership phenomenon as well. You think about a leader's job is to navigate this collision between all these human forces and business disruption and global technology interruption and digital world and 24/7 news cycles and all of it, where you don't know when you go into work that day if 3 seconds ago something has come across the news feed that will upset every bit of rational planning that you had. Like, we're shutting down, we've got a global pandemic, go home for the next year. You don't know. It's not stuff you can plan for. So, how does a leader navigate this time? The reality is that it is a very stress filled time and a very challenging one for leaders. Having some sort of self care regimen is valuable. The idea of a leader serving his or her organization by working 14, 15 hours a day, 6 days a week, 90 plus hours is no longer viable and it's no longer sustainable. Thankfully, the word sustainable is now landing in people. Like, all you have to say is, God, great heroics, not sustainable. And I want to make sure that you get to a sustainable way. And so take whatever time you need, develop whatever kind of, rubric you need for mornings or for exercise or for whatever. We are now recognizing the pressure on leaders. We are encouraging them much more actively to prioritize their own health and well-being. And enlightened organizations are really supporting that move. Our youngest, Maddie, works for Lululemon, and I have been very, very impressed. Now, granted, it's a fitness brand. I get it. But they really walk their talk, and they encourage people to take time every day out of their paid hours to go to a fitness class. They encourage people to, like, if they need to go take a walk, they take a walk. If they need to, whatever it is. And this is a high performing organization. This isn't like come to Lululemon and get a participation ribbon. No, they're changing the world. They're kicking butt, and they're doing it with healthy people. They're doing it in a more sustainable human way. The net, people opt into that culture. They want to be part of that culture. They want to give their all in their work hours to that culture and recognize giving all doesn't mean giving up their lives. That's a big deal.
I love hearing that about an organization, really letting people take time to get away from their desk if they need it, when they need it. if we aren't allowing the distance sort of work, then I think that's essential in a office environment personally.
Yeah, and there's nothing soft about that, Jana. I know Maddie, she's hard charging. She really wants to be pushed and challenged, and she wants to work hard and she wants to play hard. It's part of her ethos. But she wants to work hard. And if there's a presentation and the CEO's involved, she wants to be in that meeting. There's nothing soft about that. But there are times when you just kind of need to fold everything on your desk and go for a walk on the beach or whatever you do. And, kind of get your bearings back about, equating caring for oneself and softness has to go away. Just has to go away because it's not right. What we're talking about is sustainable performance over time.
And as you reflect back on your career, is this the biggest shift you've seen in sort of corporate culture? Has this happened, multiple times over your career?
I started in my career in the 70s. And while there was the human potential movement that grew out of the 60s and T groups and all that kind of stuff that happened in the 80s that made participation more real and more available, quality circles and T groups and stuff like that. At the end of the day, it was really all about business performance. And so, why am I talking in a circle of people? It's to get ideas for improved performance. This is different. This is really different. This is honoring and acknowledging the humanity of each of us. And I'm guessing the pandemic had an effect. I'm guessing the 24 news cycle and social media have had huge effects. I'm guessing that kind of geopolitics and the kind of razor's edge, like we are so close to that feed positively and negatively every day is having an effect. The digital divide, kind of our digital world with AI and transforming knowledge, what that means, all of these things are having an effect. I've never seen anything like this. Now, I also grew up in the 60s. 60s were a time of social upheaval, political unrest, some economic changes, geopolitics, war in Vietnam, dividing society, all that stuff, very social changes. But I've not seen changes that affect this many people in the business world ever.
So, in your first book, one of my favorite quotes is "The journey of 1,000 steps starts with a rock in the shoe." It sounds like that's how we're starting this. Everyone's kind of trying to figure it all out. And I think about that quote a lot because a lot of times when I'm beginning something, I'm like, okay, there's a pebble in my shoe, but I'm still going to make it.
Yeah. If the journey's worth it, you stay at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other quote I like kind of similar is if you look down and see the path laid out in front of you, just know that's somebody else's path
Yeah.
because you got to figure your own out.
Hmm. Yeah, that's very good. So I know we're running out of time here. I just wanted to wrap up with two more questions. So, first of all, we're wrapping up season one. What's a lesson you learned from this series that you hope that listeners take away from this?
It's a personal one. The feedback I've gotten more than any other after these 11 episodes is that it feels very natural and very conversational. And most of them were very unscripted. So lesson number 1 is when you are relaxed, when you are present, some incredible conversations can happen. They look really easy, they feel really easy, but they get to levels of depth that you couldn't have planned for. And isn't that a great way to live life? To enter into conversations, hey, give me your story. When you approach people with that kind of openness yourself, it's a very, very powerful thing. So that was lesson 1 for me. Lesson 2 is every single person on the planet has a story. Every one of us. It may not be polished, it may not be always as thoughtful as something, but we all have a story and we want to tell it. And so being the vehicle for people telling their stories is pretty fun. I so enjoyed that. I had no idea how much fun that would be. I think it was Aristotle that said something like that. You can never judge another man or person because you don't know what they've been through. I don't. I don't, but I do know they all have a story. And by doing this, gives them a chance to tell the story and in that way be seen. And it's a really cool deal.
So, you've asked every guest one question, which is, what have you been reading or listening to right now that we should know about? And I wanted to ask you that question because I know you're a voracious reader.
At the stage of my life I find myself, I'm interested in being intentional about the next phase of my life. Let's say quarter four in a basketball game. I do realize that I've had some preconceptions about aging that are probably not accurate. And so I'm reading a book called The Inner Work of Aging by Connie Zweig, who's a PhD psychologist and also Jungian psychologist. It's fabulous. It really talks about the intentionality of using this time to develop a deeper relationship with your life by looking at some of the things that didn't work before. And from a Jungian point of view, she calls shadow. So that's one. Another book I'm reading, the second book I'm reading actually, is a book by the theologian Richard Rohr, R-O-H-R, called Falling Upwards. And it's the same kind of deal. It is, we plan very intentionally the first half of our lives that are really identity and ego based, right? We do it, we make money, we get kudos, we like all that stuff, ego based. What about the second half of your life? Do we plan any for it as our identity shifts and that our ego needs are much less, which is true. Our ego's not driving the bus nearly as much as it had been. So now what? And so I'm actually working with one of my coaching clients on kind of how do you plan the next phase. So those two very personally impactful, wonderful books. The thing I'm listening to also, the Peter Attia's The Drive podcast, and he had one on Ask Me Anything about personal health and nutrition. The past 2 years have been filling my brain with podcasts, which is wonderful. God, there's so much great stuff out there. So that's what I'm listening to, and that's what I'm reading right now.
We are so lucky to live in this world of information. Sometimes it feels like too much, but then sometimes I'm like, we are in a really great spot to get to have this at our fingertips. And so I'm glad that you have those resources on your journey.
Yeah, yeah, it's wonderful.
Well, thank you for talking to me today. That is all, unless you want to add on anything.
I'd love to find out from people what most resonated with to them out of this season's guests. They were all similar but very different, from a Val Kondos to a Paul Viviano to a Joe Mello and Kent Thiry to Jen Fisher or Aaron Rocchio. Like there's so much. Again, the common theme for me is that these are all people that have done their work and really done it in a very human-centric way. But they're all very different. And I'd love to find out from people, what they liked, what they resonated with, what they want to hear more of, who they want to hear more of. That would be insanely helpful for me.
Yeah, that's your call to action, listeners.
For a deeper exploration of your own journey, you can find tools, stories, and reflection questions in my book, Leadership: Rethinking the True Path to Great Leading, or by following me on social media. I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram as Foster Mobley. Until next time, Stepwise.
Thank you for listening to Stepwise. Stepwise is brought to you by Dr. Foster Mobley. Edited and promoted by Zetis. You can listen to more episodes wherever you stream podcasts. Find out more at fostermobleymt.com or follow us on social media at Foster Mobley. That's FOSTERMOBLEY. We look forward to having an inspiring conversation with you soon.